The first thing you may think is, why am I even making this video, and how does it even make sense? Now, hear me out. That's my first answer to that. Of course, it's impossible for me to say that, like, you can't learn and do stuff before you get blind and deaf, like Helen Keller might have. But with more investigating into this stupid idea that I had, this stupid prophecy of Helen Keller wasn't actually real, is that I just find its stupidity makes more sense. It's kind of like when you think 9/11 was an inside job, and then you slowly come to the realization, but something that just makes sense before you're blinding deaf. Like, let's say I learned Morse code. Let's say I learned how to do sign language. Let's say we learned all those things before I had impairments that prevented that from even being a possibility. And that makes complete sense, because then I can go from there and create from that point on. There's ways I can interpret the world that I already existing. But Helen Keller's story just makes absolutely no sense, which is part of the reason I think it's fabricated. But it makes no sense to be fabricated at the same time. We argue at this at work every single day, and I don't know why we do, but it makes absolute sense that it would be fabricated, because it just doesn't, like, all the stars align. Helen Keller was legally blind and deaf by the time of 18 months old. How in the world would she have learned anything that would be useful that would pertain to the knowledge that you need to operate as a person after that point, before a technological era as well, before a possibility of something that could rectify the situation, something that could just easily fix it? Maybe I smoked a bit too much meth. Maybe I'm going too far down the conspiracy theory route. Maybe 9/11 was an inside job. But things like this you just can't brush under the rug like Epstein Island. It's not as easy as that. Let's work with the reason of possibility and say that, of course, legally blind means, like, for instance, I'm legally blind and I have glasses, very fancy glasses that allow me to actually see. Let's work with the reason of possibility that she could still actually see, but, like, this close in front of her. But at the same time, how do you learn language? How do you learn to speak? How do you learn to communicate if you're deaf, well, unable to see farther than this? Because that means you're unable to, like, process the information properly, and, like, this far away would be blurry. So at a point, it, like, for instance, recently I saw this video of a blind and deaf potter. Now, it was on shorts. It made a lot of sense to me, because the dude actually explained that he could hear because he has a hearing aid. Now, that makes a lot of sense. There, and you can eventually fix eye issues unless it's full, complete blindness. And there's some that we can fix, there's some that we can't, cataracts, whatnot. I'm not going to get into that. But either way, it makes a lot of sense until you get to the aspect of, this is in the 40s, and they wouldn't have had those technologies available. And that's when your brain starts to hurt. That's when Building 7 occurs. Don't Google that. And, like, your brain will go full cattywampus and start doing a reactor meltdown. Either way, I'm going to talk myself in circles for hours, because I'm going to end up with the same answer. I don't want to admit that Helen Keller, I think, was fabricated, but at the same time, I want to say something about it. Alright, and that'll be all. Peace. Oh yeah, I guess I should say the like and subscribe thing.